Hey everybody, if you're new here, I'm John Lock and I'm a hobbyist lock picker and I've been picking for about 1 year. Until recently, I had really struggled with picking disc detainer padlocks. I've seen a ton of videos about disc detainers and people seem to be able to open them really pretty easily using the Sparrow's disc detainer pick. So I think like a lot of people, I went out, got one of these. They're not too expensive and they're a pretty nice tool, actually a really nice tool. And I go and I watch videos, I watch tutorials and spent a lot of time and just, unable to figure it out. I spent hours and hours trying to pick disc detainer locks using this pick, and I just couldn't get it. And I was getting frustrated because I didn't know, why is this something that I can't figure out? And so today, this video, I want to just go over some of the things that I've learned about picking disc detainer locks and why some locks aren't so easy to open, and what the mistakes I was making early on, so that maybe you can avoid those mistakes, or if you're struggling with the same thing, I can help you out a little there. So the first thing I want to do is take a look at how disc detainer locks work. So I'm going to switch over to the computer and I've built a little model for us to look at, and hopefully that helps give us the foundation for understanding how a disc detainer lock works, and then we can figure out how to pick it. So what you're seeing on the screen is a disc detainer lock that I've made in a CAD application. And the first thing that we need to do is talk about vocabulary so that we can all understand what we're saying when we're talking about this lock. So first, the black part is called the lock body, and it's not so interesting, but there is one important component of it. And I'm going to zoom in here, and you see this orange part. This is called the sidebar. But the important thing to draw your attention to is that there is part of the lock body, there's a little groove cut out here that the sidebar sits in. So aside from holding the lock and all the components together, this is a really important part of the lock, is this groove that's cut out. I'm going to get rid of the rest of the lock body. It's not important. I'll just leave this little transparent gray part there to represent. That's what interacts with the rest of the components that we will be talking about today. The next is this orange part. I've already said its name. It's called the sidebar. Next we have this beige part, and it is called the housing or the drum. It can also be referred to. And we can see at the bottom that this is the actuator that is connected to the housing or the drum, which operates the mechanics of the locking mechanism. But that's not so important to understand for picking this lock. Then I'm going to spin around here a little bit, and we can see on the other side of this lock that the housing has a piece cut away here, and this is actually cut away not just for the visual here, but in a real lock this part is also cut away, and so you can see the insides of what's inside the housing there, and there's a purpose for this, which I'll describe in a little bit. But just to finish the discussion, on the top we have a gray part, and this is not in every disc detainer lock, but it's in most disc detainer locks, and this is called a free spinning disc. Then the red, white, and blue components are all discs, and the three yellow components are spacers. Okay, let's just take a quick look at the disc here. It's pretty simple. In the middle, there's a cutaway. This is where the key goes, and where the key interacts with the discs, puts pressure on the disc to rotate it. On the close side here, we have a little extra piece. I'm going to call this the nub. And on the other side, you see there's a little groove cut away. And yeah, I'll just call that the groove. Okay, finally, let's talk about how a disc detainer lock works. So the main thing that we want to do is to be able to rotate the housing, this beige part. But right now, if the housing tries to rotate, you can see that the sidebar, and remember that the black piece here is the lock body. I've cut away most of the lock body, but just this part to show where this sidebar interacts with the lock body. If this piece tries to rotate, the sidebar blocks it. It's trapped between the lock body and the housing. So I'm going to get a little bit better view up here, and hopefully what we can see is down the disc stack here that all the grooves are aligned. This means that the sidebar is able to fall into the lock, and once that happens, that means that all of our components are able to rotate and clear the lock body. And this means the actuator at the bottom of the housing is going to turn and open our lock. This is excellent. This is the part I've been waiting for. Now we know about what the components are called of a disc detainer lock. We have an idea about how a disc detainer lock operates. Let's get to the theory of picking. So you'll notice on the housing, I've made it transparent. Also the spacers I've made transparent. For this part, the spacers are passive. They play no role in picking. I've also aligned all the discs so that they are the way that it would be after removing a key. You'll see all the nubs are aligned and they're far to the right. So the first step on picking any disc detainer lock is rotating all of the discs as far clockwise as you can. So usually you can do this with a rotator tool or a wiper insert, and you simply just rotate the discs as far as they go. The nubs are what are going to make it stop. The nubs are going to touch the housing and it's going to stop at some point. I should also note here that the top disc, the gray one, is a spinner. You remember it's the free spinning disc. It also plays no role in picking. So it just will spin freely. It offers drill protection for the lock, but it plays no role in security. And therefore, we really won't have to worry that much about this. Now, here's the interesting part. I have this lock configured so that it is a front tensioning lock. That means on disc 1, and the red disc is disc 1, we don't count the free spinner when we talk about discs, and we count from the top down. So disc 1 is red, disc 2 is white, disc 3 is blue. So disc 1 is a 0 cut, and that means that when it's rotated all the way clockwise and its nub is leaning against the housing, that its gate is aligned with the sidebar. So that means that in this instance, that this gate, the sidebar is in this gate, where you can see our other gates are not aligned with the sidebar. So what does this do? Why does this help us? Well, here's the interesting part. Let's go ahead and put our pick into the lock and apply some tension. So our pick tool is going to go down into the lock, and it's going to grab right on disc 1. So you can see here, I'm hoping to get you a good angle, that our tool is right on disc 1, and we're applying rotation in a clockwise motion. And now our sidebar has fallen into the gate of disc 1. And you can see, if I get right on it, that this causes some geometry to happen in the lock. The sidebar at the top has now leaned into this gate. The pressure from The tension on disc 1 has caused the sidebar to lift out of the lock body into the gate, and this has an effect on the other discs. On disc 1, on disc 2, the white disc now, we have quite a bit of pressure from the sidebar on the disc, and that is why we feel binding on disc 2 now. So in the model now, you can see that I have the pick tip here, and it's on disc 2. And what we're going to do is try doing counterclockwise rotation. And what we're looking for is discs that are binding. And because our sidebar is leaning and rubbing against this disc, we will feel that binding. So we're going to just simply rotate it counterclockwise, and as soon as the gate aligns with the sidebar, we're going to either hear a click or feel it. I mean, it's going to, the tension will immediately let off the disc for a second. The drag will become much less, and you'll be able to feel that you are in that gate. As soon as we get disc 2 in that gate, we want to stop touching disc 2 altogether. It is set, so we need to move our pick down to disc number 3. Now, what we're going to do with disc 3 is the same exact thing that we did with disc number 2, and that is rotate it counterclockwise. But of course, our geometry on our sidebar has also changed even more. So it is now rubbing against 3. So we're going to feel that binding on disc 3. So we get our pick down and we simply start rotating again counterclockwise, and we will feel it enter the gate, and we know that our third disc is set. And this is the magic moment. As soon as our disc 3 gets set, our sidebar will fall into the gates of all 3 discs and move out of the way of the lock body, and now becomes in alignment with the housing. Now, because we're tensioning off of disc 1, and disc 1 is a 0 cut, that means the nub of this disc is pushing against the housing, and because our tip, our pick tip, or tension tip on our tool is pushing on that, we are going to get rotation, and the lock is going to spin open for us. Well, I hope that explanation there was useful for understanding at least the theory of what's supposed to be done. So if you were struggling with the theory, I hoped that that helped. Even understanding that theory, though, I was struggling to get a lock to open. And there are 3 mistakes that I made, and I want to share them with you. So mistake number 1 is I would take my lock and I would rotate using just a wiper insert. I'd rotate all the discs clockwise, just like we know we need to. And then I would stick my pick in, so having to align the tip here and put it in, jam it as far down as it could, and then rotate. And then start looking for binding discs and finding that I wasn't finding anything binding. And the mistake I'm making here is that it is possible for this pick tip, the tension tip here, not the pick tip, the tension tip on the top of the tool, to grab onto more than 1 disc at a time. I was sticking it down as far as I could, and I was actually grabbing 2 discs. And if I'm rotating on the second disc and the first disc, then one of those, unless they're both 0 cut, one's never going to get in the gate. I'm never going to get it open. So on this tool, you need just to really make sure that you're getting past the spinner, if there's a spinner on the lock, and just right on that first disc. And here's a little helpful hint that maybe you didn't even know about this tool. If you loosen these handles a bit, the tension head is adjustable here. So it is difficult to get the tension head maybe exactly on the lock where you need it, and to keep it at that angle up, not pushing it down further, getting rid of any of this play. you can adjust the tension head to quite a good degree here to fit there. This is especially helpful if the lock core is really set further down, especially on kryptonite bike locks, for example. There can be a lot of housing in the way, and you need to adjust that to move it down. So that was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 that I was making, and I think this is really common, is that you have to keep, there are a lot of things going on at the same time when you're picking, and you've got to keep your pick aligned. You know, you're tensioning it, but you've got to keep it straight. You know, it can kind of move in 3 dimensions here, and you need it to be exactly parallel with the lock, or you're going to be knocking discs and not able to get your pick down the whole stack. So this is something that just comes with time and experience. You don't need to tension really hard on these. The harder you tension, the more feedback you're going to get. So hard tension's good, and there's no oversetting. So as long as you're not tensioning so hard that you can't spin the discs, hard tension is fine, but not so much that you can't control where your pick head is going. Now, there are some things that I think can help new pickers with this, and this is a part that I found on Thingiverse, and I will link it in the video description, but it helps you keep your pick aligned. You know, it flat to the body, and so then you don't have to worry about being off center. It helps you there. Of course, you might need to adjust your tension tip to get to the right height after adding this, but you can still adjust this and get that all to the right height. And I found, for me, just starting out, that this was very helpful, and I would recommend that for anybody that's having problems just not getting the right feel for that. It removes one extra variable when picking it, just to get the right feel, and I think over time that you'll develop the feel, the knack to hold it correctly while you're rotating. But this is a very good training aid, and heck, why not use it all the time? I mean, there's no disadvantage to it, and I think it's a really smart piece, and probably something that should come with the tool. And one more little hint is I just cut away really badly a spot for that right in my pick case for the Sparrows, and you can do the same. So I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. Now let's see the last mistake I made. The last mistake I made is this lock happens to be a front tensioning lock. And I can tell that because where the key, if I look at the key and insert it, I see that right here is the first bit that's interacting with the first disc. And so when I turn the lock, I know that the first disc is a 0 cut. Now, I just assumed, because of all the videos I'd seen on YouTube and knowing that this is a front tensioning tool, that every, disc detainer lock, no name, Chinese manufactured disc detainer lock was obviously going to be a front tensioning lock. I knew that when you get into the more expensive, complex ones, that they're going to be mid or rear tensioned, but I just assumed that every single lock that I was going to find on eBay, on Amazon, was going to be a front tensioning lock, and it's just not the case. And I'll say that the majority of disc detainer locks that I've gotten from eBay and Amazon, from these kind of no-name manufactured ones, are actually rear tension locks. So tensioning off that first disc means that first disc is not going to be in a gate, and it's never going to open. Now, I wish that I had a way to tell you this is the lock that is a front tensioning one, and get this one to practice on, because I think practicing on a front tensioning one when you're learning how to pick disc detainer locks is absolutely the best. It is possible to pick rear tension locks with this tool. I'm going to put a part at the end of this video that shows the theory of how that works, but it's a challenge, and everything is harder about picking that way, and it's not the way to learn how to pick disc detainer locks. So this one, this Danjing one I have, happens to be a front tensioning lock. I don't know if every single one would be, or if I just got lucky with this one on the bidding. If you know of a lock that is always front tensioning, I'm sure people would love to know. Put a comment down below. I would love to know a lock that could be recommended as a practice lock. My only other advice to you is to do what I did and buy several locks on eBay. For me, in Germany, they're about 5 to 8 euros a piece, including shipping. The kind of eBay's flooded with them. If I type in security padlock or padlock, I just find a bunch of them. I'm guessing that in the United States and North America and other parts of the world, you find a similar thing. Probably the market's flooded with these. Buy a handful. And remember just to take a look at the key. If it's completely square where it interacts with the first disc, remembering that your lock might have a floating disc up top, which you can test by simply spinning it round and round and seeing if it never stops. If that's the case, then you know that it is a free floating spinner. Then you're looking for the disc underneath that. But if there's a cut in it, an angle on the key that interacts with the first disc, it is not a front tensioning lock. So that was mistake number 3 I made, was trying to pick using a front tensioning technique on a lock that was not front tensioning. So now we're going to talk about the theory of how to use a top tensioning tool to pick a rear tensioning disc detainer lock. So what I've done now is I've swapped disc 1 and 3. So we now have in the top a disc that is not zero cut. That means that you see here the nib is, we're using this to tension still, so then it's rotated as much as it can clockwise. But if I take a look around here, we can see that the gate, the sidebar is not in the gate, and the gate is not aligned with the sidebar. Now, when we tension this disc, we still will get some force on the sidebar against the disc 2 and 3. It's going to be much less pressure from the sidebar on those 2 discs. It's going to be a completely different feeling. Binding, it's not going to be a heavy binding. It's going to be a really gentle touch. And that's why I say that it's not really a great technique for somebody that's learning how to do disc detainer locks, because it's a very subtle feel. But it is one that you can develop over time, absolutely. So you absolutely can use a front tensioning disc to pick a rear tensioning disc detainer lock. So now the state that it's in is that we have put discs 2, the white one, and disc 3, the red one, into the gates, and the sidebar is aligned there. And we're now tensioning still off of the top disc, that is disc 1, the blue disc, but it is not in the gate. So how do we get this open? Remember that we need the tension to be on the disc that has its nub against the housing, because that's what's going to rotate the whole lock. So what we need to do is switch and make our picking head our tensioning head. So we're going to bring our tension now down to a 0 cut. And we're going to know where a 0 cut is, because when we rotated all of our discs to the right, we knew that that was in the 0 position, and we checked for gates. When we picked this one, we noted that when we moved it counterclockwise, we actually got out of the gate, and then when we moved it all the way back clockwise, we fell back into the gate. So we just had to take that mental note to know that the bottom disc in this one was a 0 cut. It could be another disc. It could have been disc 2 for a mid tensioning. So we just have to keep note of where any 0-bitted disc is, and we can use any 0-bitted disc to apply tension to. In this lock, that means it's the bottom disc, disc 3. So we're now using the pick head, the pick tool, to tension on disc 3. And what we're going to do is now use what is the tensioning tip and use a opposite rotation on that. That means counterclockwise rotation. So let's move over here, and we're going to now move our pick in this counterclockwise, not our pick, our tensioning head in a counterclockwise rotation. And that means that we're going to be rotating disc 1, the blue disc, backwards now. So let's take a look from this angle where we can see where our gate is. We're going to now use the tensioning tip to rotate this backwards, and we're eventually going to fall into the gate. And at this point, using our pick tip, the pink part of the tool now, the one that's in the bottom, we still have pressure going that direction. That is going to interact with the housing, and we are going to get an open on the lock now. Everything will turn. So that's the theory of how to pick with a top tensioning tool with a rear tensioned disc detainer lock. It's absolutely possible, but it just takes a feel, and it's one that I would recommend you wait until you figured out how to pick with a top tensioning lock before you try to do the bottom tension technique. Well, everybody, I hope that you found that information helpful. I really wanted to try to demystify some of what it takes to open a disc detainer lock. I know that I tried really hard for a long time, and I was just confused. Why can so many people seem to do it so easily, and what's going wrong for me? What am I not figuring out? So it just took a lot of practice, trial and error, and I thought I had put together my experiences for you to see if it could help you learn how to pick your first disc detainer lock. If you like watching videos of people lock picking, that's normally what my videos are. Consider giving me a subscribe. But in any case, just let me know what you thought of the video. Leave a comment below. And with that, I just want to wish you a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and hope to see you in my next video. Bye for now.